My parents won't be at the wedding. They don't approve of us. Ryan Caldwell said it with the kind of finality that left no room for questions. His voice was calm, measured, the way someone might discuss the weather or the traffic on Interstate 71. He didn't look at me when he spoke. Instead, he focused on folding a dish towel with mechanical precision, each corner aligned perfectly before he set it on the counter. I stood in the doorway of our Cleveland apartment, keys still in my hand, trying to process what he'd just said. We'd been planning our wedding for 3 weeks. Small, intimate, nothing extravagant. But every time I mentioned meeting his family, Ryan found a reason to deflect. Tonight, he'd finally given me an answer. It just wasn't the one I'd hoped for. They don't approve? I repeated carefully. Ryan, we've been together for 14 months. Don't you think they'd at least want to meet me before deciding that? He turned then, his expression patient but firm. Natalie, my family is traditional, very traditional. They think we're rushing into this, that we should wait another year, maybe 2. I've tried to explain that we're adults, that we know what we want, but they won't budge. The explanation sounded reasonable on the surface. Families had opinions, parents worried. But something about the way he delivered it felt rehearsed, like he'd practiced the words in front of a mirror until they sounded natural. So we just exclude them entirely? I asked. Don't even send an invitation? There's no point. Ryan crossed his arms, leaning against the counter. They made their position clear. Inviting them would only create tension. This day should be about us, not about managing their expectations. I wanted to argue. I wanted to insist that we at least try, that shutting them out before giving them a chance seemed extreme. But the look on his face stopped me. It wasn't anger or defensiveness. It was something quieter, something that felt like resignation, as though this was a battle he'd already fought and lost, long before I came into the picture. Okay, I said finally, setting my keys on the table, if that's what you think is best. Relief flickered across his features. He stepped forward, wrapping his arms around me, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. Thank you for understanding, I promise. Once they see how happy we are, they'll come around eventually. But right now, let's just focus on us. I nodded against his chest, trying to believe him. Ryan had always been steady, reliable. He worked as an operations coordinator for a logistics company, a job that kept him busy, but not overwhelmed. He split the rent, cooked dinner when I worked late, never complained about the small size of our apartment or the lack of luxury. He was practical, grounded, exactly the kind of partner I'd been looking for after a string of relationships that went nowhere. But as I pulled away and headed toward the bedroom, a small seed of doubt planted itself in the back of my mind. Not suspicion, exactly, just curiosity. Why would parents who cared enough to have strong opinions about their son's wedding refuse to even meet the woman he planned to marry? What kind of disapproval was so absolute that it left no room for conversation? I told myself not to overthink it. Families were complicated. Ryan knew his parents better than I did. If he said this was the right approach, I should trust him. Still, as I changed out of my work clothes and heard him humming softly in the kitchen, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. Something Ryan wasn't saying, something he didn't want me to know. The first crack appeared 3 days later. I wasn't snooping. That's important to establish. I was doing laundry, sorting through the hamper, separating lights from darks the way I always did on Saturday mornings. Ryan had left early for a run along Lake Erie, one of his weekend rituals. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of traffic outside and the occasional creak of old pipes in the walls. When I pulled his gray blazer from the hamper, something fluttered out of the pocket and landed on the floor. A small slip of paper, folded twice. I picked it up, intending to toss it in the trash, assuming it was a grocery receipt or a note from work. Instead, I found myself staring at a hotel invoice. 4 Seasons, Cleveland. Presidential suite, one night. Total charges, $840. The date was from 2 weeks ago. The same weekend, Ryan told me he had to travel to Akron for a client meeting. He'd left Friday afternoon, come back Saturday evening, and spent Sunday catching up on sleep. I'd offered to go with him, suggested we turn it into a little getaway, but he'd insisted it was all business. Meetings, presentations, nothing I'd find interesting. $840 for one night. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the receipt trembling slightly in my hands. Ryan's salary wasn't bad. But it wasn't Four Seasons money either. We split rent on a modest 2-bedroom apartment. We shopped at Kroger, not Whole Foods. We saved for vacations by skipping takeout for a month. The idea of him dropping nearly $1,000 on a single hotel room made no sense. Maybe it was a work expense. Maybe the company reimbursed him. That had to be it. Except when I looked closer, I noticed the receipt was marked as a personal charge. No company name, no indication of a business day, just Ryan's name and a credit card number I didn't recognize. If you're finding this story as unsettling as I did, please hit the like button and subscribe. You won't believe where this goes next. I folded the receipt and slipped it into my pocket, my mind racing. There had to be an explanation, a reasonable one. But the longer I sat there, the harder it became to imagine what that explanation might be. When Ryan returned from his run an hour later, flushed and breathing hard, I was in the kitchen making coffee. He kissed my cheek, grabbed a water bottle from the fridge, and headed toward the shower without pausing. I watched him go, the receipt burning a hole in my pocket. I didn't mention it. Not yet. Instead, I waited until later that afternoon when we were both relaxed, sitting on the couch, half watching a movie neither of us cared about. "Hey," I said casually, as though the thought had just occurred to me. "That Akron trip 2 weeks ago, how did it go?" Ryan glanced over, his expression neutral. "Fine. Boring, mostly. A lot of PowerPoint slides and bad coffee." "Where did you stay?" "Some chain hotel near the highway. Nothing special?" I nodded, keeping my face blank. "Did the company cover it?" "Yeah, of course. Why?" "Just curious." I shrugged, reaching for my mug. "I was thinking maybe next time I could tag along, make a weekend out of it." "Sure," he said, turning back to the TV. "If it's somewhere more interesting than Akron." He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. His lie came out as smoothly as the truth would have. And that, more than the receipt itself, sent a chill down my spine. The second crack came 5 days later, and this time I wasn't even looking for it. Ryan had asked me to grab his phone charger from the bedroom. His cell was dying, and he was in the middle of a work call in the living room, pacing back and forth the way he always did when he talked business. I found the charger tangled in the sheets and started to head back out. That's when I saw the closet door hanging slightly open. Our apartment had limited storage, so we divided the closet carefully. My work clothes on the left, his on the right, seasonal items stacked on the top shelf. But something looked different. There was a garment bag hanging at the far end, pushed almost out of sight, that I didn't remember seeing before. Curiosity got the better of me. I unzipped it slowly, expecting to find one of Ryan's older suits, or maybe something he'd picked up at a thrift store. Instead, I found a Brioni blazer. I knew the brand because my father had always dreamed of owning one. He'd point them out in magazines, marveling at the craftsmanship, the Italian wool, the price tag that put them out of reach for a man who'd spent his career in middle management. When he passed away 3 years ago, my mother had joked that at least he wouldn't have to feel guilty about spending $6,000 on a jacket. This one still had the tags attached. $6,200. I stared at it for a long time, my hand resting on the fabric. It was real. Not a knockoff, not a mistake. The tags were crisp, the stitching flawless. Someone had paid $6,200 for this jacket, and then hung it in our closet without ever wearing it. Ryan's voice drifted in from the living room, still deep in conversation about shipment schedules and delivery windows. I zipped the garment bag carefully, exactly the way I'd found it, and walked back out with the charger. "Thanks," he said absently, taking it from me without looking up. I sat down on the couch, my mind spinning. The hotel receipt, the blazer. Two pieces of a puzzle I didn't understand yet, but that were starting to form a picture I didn't like. That night, after Ryan fell asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I thought about the way he deflected questions about his family, the way he always paid in cash when we went out, even though I'd offered to split things on credit cards to build points, the way he'd insisted on keeping our finances separate, claiming it was healthier for our relationship. I'd believed him because I wanted to, because he was kind and attentive and made me feel safe. Because after watching my mother struggle as a single parent, working two jobs to keep us afloat, I'd promised myself I'd find someone stable, someone who didn't need rescuing. But stability, I was beginning to realize, could be a mask. And the man sleeping beside me might be wearing one I'd never thought to question. The breaking point came a week later, during what should have been an ordinary evening. Ryan had been working late more often, coming home after 8 or 9 at night with takeout and apologies. I didn't mind. My job as a financial analyst kept me busy too, and I understood the demands of a career. But that Thursday, I decided to surprise him. I left work early, picked up ingredients for his favorite meal, and started cooking. While the chicken roasted, I tidied up the living room, gathering scattered papers and magazines. That's when I noticed Ryan's laptop sitting open on the coffee table, screen dark but not closed. He must have been working from home earlier and forgotten to shut it down. I wasn't trying to snoop. I was going to close it, save the battery. But when I touched the trackpad, the screen lit up, and I saw it. An email thread, half composed, the cursor blinking in the middle of a sentence. The trust stipulation remains in effect until such time as the rest was cut off. Ryan had minimized the window before leaving, but not closed it. I stood there, frozen, staring at those words. Trust stipulation, legal language, the kind of phrasing that suggested money, inheritance, formal arrangements. The kind of phrasing that didn't fit with the story of parents who simply disapproved of their son's wedding. Before I could read further, I heard keys in the door. I stepped back quickly, my heart pounding, and grabbed a stack of magazines to justify why I was standing near the laptop. Ryan walked in, loosening his tie, and smiled when he saw me. Hey, smells incredible in here. Chicken and roasted vegetables, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Should be ready in 20 minutes. He crossed to the couch, closing the laptop with one smooth motion, and kissed me on the forehead. You're the best. I'm going to change real quick. I nodded, watching him disappear into the bedroom. Then I went back to the kitchen, my hand shaking as I stirred the vegetables. Trust stipulation. The words echoed in my mind, refusing to let go. That night, after dinner, after Ryan fell asleep beside me, I made a decision. I pulled out my phone and opened a search engine. Ryan Caldwell, Youngstown, Ohio. That's where he'd told me he grew up. A small industrial town, nothing fancy. His parents still lived there, he'd said, in the same house where he'd spent his childhood. But when I searched, I found nothing. No Ryan Caldwell in Youngstown, no social media profiles, no high school records, no trace of the life he described. So I tried a different search. Ryan Caldwell, Ohio. This time, results appeared. But they weren't what I expected. Caldwell Automotive Group, Columbus, Ohio. Family owned, 3 generations, a sprawling empire of dealerships across the Midwest, estimated worth in the tens of millions. And there, buried in a Business Journal article from 4 years ago, was a photo. A family portrait taken at some charity gala. Graham Caldwell, founder. Vivian Caldwell, his wife. And standing beside them, younger but unmistakable, was Ryan. Not Ryan Caldwell, operations coordinator from a modest background. Ryan Caldwell, heir to a fortune. I stared at the photo until my eyes burned. Then I kept scrolling, searching for more. But after that article, his name disappeared from the family's public records. No more photos, no more mentions, as though he'd been erased or cut off. The room felt too small suddenly, the walls pressing in. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Ryan, and went to the bathroom. I sat on the edge of the tub, phone clutched in my hands, trying to make sense of what I'd found. He'd lied. About his background, about his family, about everything. The question wasn't why his parents wouldn't come to the wedding. The question was why he'd hidden them from me in the first place. And what else he was hiding. I needed help. Someone I could trust, someone who understood financial systems and could help me figure out what was really going on. The next morning, I called Owen Torres. Owen and I had gone to college together, both of us grinding through finance degrees while working part-time jobs to cover tuition. After graduation, he'd gone into forensic accounting, specializing in fraud investigations and asset tracking. We'd stayed in touch over the years, meeting for coffee every few months, commiserating about difficult clients and impossible deadlines. When I explained what I'd found, leaving out Ryan's name at first, Owen went quiet on the other end of the line. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that your fiancé lied about his family being working class when they're actually worth millions? That's what it looks like. And he's been insisting on keeping your finances completely separate?" He said it was healthier, that couples who merge everything too fast end up resenting each other. Owen made a sound somewhere between a sigh and a groan. "Natalie, that's textbook. When someone with money hides their wealth and pushes for financial separation, it's usually because they're either protecting assets or planning to access yours." The words hit me like cold water. Access mine? Owen, I don't have anything worth taking. I make a decent salary, but I'm not rich. You have credit. You have a clean financial history. You're a financial analyst with institutional trust. That's worth a lot to someone who might have burned their own bridges. I pressed a hand to my forehead, suddenly dizzy. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you need to let me look into this. Send me his full name, date of birth if you have it, and your bank statements for the past 6 months. Anything you've shared financially. I'll run a background check, see what comes up. Owen, if he finds out I'm investigating him, then you'll know he has something to hide." Owen's voice was gentle, but firm. "Natalie, you're one of the smartest people I know. If your gut is telling you something's wrong, listen to it. Better to be paranoid and safe than trusting and screwed." I closed my eyes, thinking about the hotel receipt, the blazer, the email fragment, the family photo. "Okay, I'll send you everything tonight." "Good. And Natalie, be careful. Don't confront him until we know what we're dealing with." I promised I wouldn't. But even as I hung up, I knew it was going to be nearly impossible to act normal around Ryan, to smile and laugh and plan a wedding with someone who might be playing me for reasons I couldn't yet fathom. That evening, I sent Owen every document I could find. Bank statements showing the modest checking account Ryan and I shared for household expenses, copies of the hotel receipt, and photos of the Brioni tag, the link to the Caldwell Automotive Group article, Ryan's birth date, which I pulled from the birthday card I'd given him last year. Then I waited. 3 days passed. 3 days of pretending everything was fine, of making small talk over breakfast and watching movies in the evening. Ryan seemed relaxed, maybe even happier than usual. He'd started talking about honeymoon destinations, showing me photos of beaches in Costa Rica and mountain lodges in Colorado. Every smile felt like a lie I was complicit in. On the 4th day, Owen called. "You need to sit down for this," he said without preamble. I was at work, sitting in my cubicle with spreadsheets glowing on 3 monitors. I minimized them all and swiveled my chair to face the window. "I'm sitting. I found a phone number that shows up on your shared cell plan 47 times in the last month. Always late at night, usually between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. The number belongs to someone named Sienna Vaughn." My stomach dropped. "Who is she?" "I'm still digging, but from what I can tell, she's 31, lives in Columbus, works in interior design. And here's the interesting part. She has a business account that received a payment of $8,500 2 weeks ago. The memo on the transfer says interior design deposit. Interior design, I repeated numbly. From your joint checking account? The one you're primary on? The room tilted. I gripped the edge of my desk, forcing myself to breathe. He told me that account was just for rent and utilities. Well, he's been using it for other things. This is the only large transfer I've found so far, but there are smaller ones too. A few hundred here, 1,000 there, all to the same account. What would you do in this situation? Would you confront him immediately or keep digging? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Owen, what's happening here? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. In the meantime, don't mention the Vaughn woman. Don't mention anything. Just keep acting normal and let me follow the money trail. I promised I would. But when I hung up and turned back to my desk, I couldn't focus. The numbers on my screens blurred together. All I could see was the image of Ryan, sitting across from me at breakfast this morning, asking if I preferred morning or evening flights for the honeymoon, acting as though everything between us was exactly what it appeared to be. When I got home that night, Ryan was already there, cooking pasta in the kitchen. He'd opened a bottle of wine, poured 2 glasses, and set them on the counter. "Hey," he said, smiling. "Rough day?" "Long," I managed. "Lots of spreadsheets?" "Well, I've got just the thing to help you relax." He gestured to the wine. "This is from that little shop on Coventry Road. The guy said it pairs well with marinara." I picked up the glass, holding it but not drinking. Ryan didn't seem to notice. He was focused on the stove, stirring sauce with one hand while checking his phone with the other. "So I've been thinking," he said, casually. "Maybe we should move the wedding up, not by much. Just a month or 2. I know we talked about spring, but winter weddings can be beautiful too, and it would give us something to look forward to during the holidays." My hand tightened around the glass. "Move it up? Why?" "No reason. Just seems like we're ready, you know? Why wait?" "Because waiting gives me time to figure out who you really are," I thought. But I said, "Let me think about it. I'd need to check with my mom. Make sure she can adjust her schedule." "Of course." Ryan turned off the burner and started plating pasta. No pressure. It was just a thought. We ate dinner in near silence, the tension sitting between us like a third person at the table. Ryan didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did. And he was just better at pretending than I was. After dinner, he handed me a manila folder. "What's this?" "Prenup." He said it lightly, as though he were handing me a takeout menu. I know we talked about not needing one, but my buddy at work convinced me it's smart. Just basic stuff. Protects both of us if things ever go south, which they won't. I opened the folder slowly. The document inside was dense, legal language packed into 12 pages. I skimmed the first few paragraphs, catching words like separate property and marital assets, and equitable distribution. "Ryan, this is a lot to process." "I know, but the lawyer said if we sign it this week, we can get it filed before the end of the month. He's going on vacation after that, and I'd rather have it handled sooner than later." Something about the urgency bothered me. "Can I take a few days to read it?" "Sure, but don't take too long. The lawyer's already drawn it up. We just need signatures." He kissed the top of my head and went to take a shower. I sat at the table, staring at the prenup, my mind racing. This wasn't normal. The rushed timeline, the casual tone, the insistence on signing quickly. I pulled out my phone and texted Owen. He just gave me a prenup. Says we need to sign this week. The response came 30 seconds later. "Do not sign anything. Send me a copy. Now." I took photos of every page, my hands shaking. Then I slipped the prenup back into its folder and left it on the table, exactly where Ryan had placed it. When he came out of the shower, I was already in bed, pretending to sleep. I heard him move around the apartment, checking his phone, turning off lights. Eventually, he slid into bed beside me, his breathing evening out as he drifted off. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering how much longer I could keep pretending, How much longer before everything fell apart? Owen called the next morning while I was on my lunch break, sitting in my car in the parking garage. Natalie, we have a serious problem. What did you find? Clause 7C in that prenup. It's buried in the middle, written in a way that sounds like standard asset protection. But what it actually does is transfer all your current assets into a shared management trust. What does that mean? It means Ryan becomes the trustee. He controls everything: your savings, your retirement accounts, even your salary. It all goes into this trust, and he's the one who decides how it gets distributed. The parking garage suddenly felt airless. That can't be legal. It's legal if you sign it. And once you do, unwinding it is almost impossible. You'd need a lawyer, a court order, proof of coercion. It could take years. Why would he do this? Owen hesitated. I think I'm starting to understand. I did more digging into the Caldwell family. Turns out Ryan was cut off 3 years ago. There was an internal audit at their company, and they found discrepancies. $470,000 missing from a fund Ryan managed. They didn't press charges, but they did remove him from all family accounts and trusts. Vivian Caldwell filed for a restraining order preventing him from accessing any company assets. The world tilted. He embezzled from his own family, and now he's trying to access your money. Natalie, I think he's done this before. I found a lawsuit from 2 years ago. A woman in Cincinnati claimed Ryan defrauded her out of $60,000. The case was settled out of court, sealed records. But the pattern fits. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. What do I do? You confront him, but not alone and not without backup. I'm coming to Cleveland tonight. We're going to figure this out together. I hung up and sat in the car, trembling. Everything I'd believed about Ryan, the steady job, the modest lifestyle, the careful saving, was a performance. He wasn't building a life with me. He was setting a trap. And I'd almost walked into it. That evening, I told Ryan I had plans with a friend and wouldn't be home until late. He barely looked up from his laptop, waving absently as I headed for the door. I met Owen at a coffee shop in Ohio City. Far enough from our apartment that I didn't worry about running into anyone we knew. He had a folder thick with printouts, bank records, and articles and legal documents. Here's what we know, he said, spreading papers across the table. Ryan was born into wealth. The Caldwell family built an automotive empire worth an estimated $80 million. He worked for the company after college, managing investment funds. Then 3 years ago, the money disappeared. His parents launched an investigation, found evidence of wire transfers to offshore accounts, and cut him off completely. They didn't prosecute, probably to avoid scandal, but they made sure he couldn't touch family money again. So what's he been living on? Other people. I found records of 3 other women in the past 2 years. Each one described a similar pattern. He presents himself as middle class, moves in quickly, talks about marriage, then finds a way to access their finances. Sometimes it's a shared account. Sometimes it's a loan he never repays. Sometimes it's a prenup that gives him control. I felt sick. And Sienna Vaughn? That's where it gets complicated. At first I thought she was a mistress, but after more digging, I think she might be another victim. Or maybe she's in on it. I can't tell yet. But that $8,500 went to her account, supposedly for interior design work that never happened. He's been planning this from the beginning. Owen reached across the table, squeezing my hand. Natalie, I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. What do I do? I can't just keep living with him. But if I confront him without proof, he'll disappear. That's why we need to set a trap, make him think he's won, get him to reveal his hand, and then we bring in the people who can stop him. Who? Owen's expression hardened. His parents. Because I guarantee they want to know if their son is still running scams. And if he is, they're going to want to shut it down before it blows back on the family name. I stared at him, my mind racing. It was risky, dangerous. But it might be the only way to get ahead of this. Okay, I said finally. Tell me what to do. The plan was simple on paper, terrifying in practice. I would tell Ryan I decided to move the wedding up, just like he wanted. I'd agree to sign the prenup, but first, I'd insist on one thing: meeting his parents. Not to ask permission, but to show respect, to prove we were serious. If he refused, it would confirm he was hiding something. If he agreed, we'd catch him in the lie when they didn't show up. Either way, we'd have leverage. Owen would reach out to Vivian Caldwell directly, using his forensic accounting credentials to request a meeting about irregularities involving her son. If she agreed to listen, we'd have allies. If she didn't, we'd at least have tried. It was a gamble. But at this point, I didn't have many options left. That night, I went home and found Ryan asleep on the couch, television flickering in the dark. I stood in the doorway, watching him, trying to reconcile the man I'd fallen for with the predator Owen had described. He looked peaceful, vulnerable, even. But I knew now that appearances meant nothing. I woke him gently, helped him to bed. As he drifted off again, I whispered into the darkness, "I'm going to find out the truth, whatever it takes." He didn't respond, didn't hear me, but I heard myself, and that was enough. The next morning, over coffee, I made my move. "I've been thinking about what you said, about moving the wedding up." Ryan looked up, surprised. "Yeah? I want to do it, but on one condition." His expression shifted, cautious now. "What condition?" "I want to meet your parents first, not to ask permission, just to show respect, to let them know we're serious, even if they don't approve." For a moment, Ryan said nothing. Then he set down his mug, his jaw tightening. "Natalie, I told you. They won't. I know what you told me. But if we're really doing this, if we're really building a life together, I need to at least try, for my own peace of mind." He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "You don't understand how difficult they are. Then help me understand. Take me to meet them. Let me see for myself." The silence stretched between us, heavy and tense. Finally, Ryan turned back, his expression unreadable. "Fine, I'll arrange something. But don't say I didn't warn you." I nodded, keeping my face neutral. But inside, my heart was pounding. Because Owen had already made contact with Vivian Caldwell. And she'd agreed to meet. Not at Ryan's request, at mine. 3 days after I agreed to meet Ryan's parents, Owen sent me an address. Ashford Country Club, private dining room, 2 p.m. Saturday. Vivian Caldwell had responded to his email within hours, her message terse but clear. "If my son is involved in fraud again, I want to know. Bring documentation." Ryan, meanwhile, seemed pleased that I'd finally agreed to stop pushing. He told me his parents had softened, that they'd agreed to a casual lunch. Nothing formal. He picked the same venue Owen had already secured, which should have been my first warning that something was wrong. But I was so focused on getting through the meeting that I didn't question the coincidence. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. I dressed carefully, choosing a navy dress that felt professional without being severe. Ryan wore khakis and a button-down, the picture of casual confidence. In the car, he talked about his parents' quirks, how his father didn't like small talk, how his mother judged people by their handshakes. "Just be yourself," he said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "They're going to love you once they get past their initial reservations." I nodded, my stomach churning. Everything he said sounded reasonable. But I knew now that reasonable was Ryan's specialty. He'd built an entire life on making lies sound like truth. Ashford Country Club sat on the edge of Cleveland, surrounded by manicured lawns and rolling golf courses. The building itself was all stone and dark wood, designed to evoke old money and quiet power. Ryan pulled into the parking lot, and I noticed his hands tighten on the steering wheel. "You okay?" I asked. "Fine, just haven't been here in a while." We walked inside together. The hostess greeted Ryan by name, which surprised me, then led us down a hallway lined with portraits of past club presidents. The private dining room was at the end, door slightly ajar. Ryan pushed it open, and I stepped inside. The room was empty, no table set for lunch, no parents waiting, just chairs arranged in a semicircle. And Owen Torres standing by the window with a woman I didn't recognize. She was in her early 40s, professionally dressed, holding a leather portfolio. Ryan froze in the doorway. "What is this?" "Natalie," Owen said calmly. "This is Rebecca Kim. She's a family law attorney who used to work with the Caldwell estate." Rebecca stepped forward, extending her hand. "Ms. Reeves, thank you for agreeing to meet." I shook her hand, my pulse racing. Ryan's face had gone pale, his expression shifting from confusion to something harder. "Natalie, what's going on?" His voice was tight, controlled. "I know about the hotel receipt," I said quietly. "The blazer, Sienna Vaughn, the prenup, all of it." For a moment, Ryan just stared at me. Then his jaw clenched and he turned to Owen. "You've been investigating me?" "I've been protecting my friend," Owen replied, "which is more than you've been doing." Ryan's composure cracked. He took a step back toward the door, but before he could leave, it swung open again. This time, a man in his 50s entered, wearing a suit that screamed corporate lawyer. Behind him was someone else. A woman with a briefcase and an air of quiet authority that made everyone in the room straighten unconsciously. "Mr. Caldwell," the lawyer said, his tone clipped. "I'm David Brennan, retained by Ms. Reeves as of this morning. This is Detective Andrea Ferris, Financial Crimes Division." Ryan's face drained of all color. He looked at me, then at Owen, then at the detective. "This is insane. Natalie, whatever they've told you—" "Sit down," Rebecca Kim interrupted, her voice sharp. "Unless you want to make this worse than it already is." Ryan hesitated, then slowly sank into one of the chairs. I remained standing, my hands trembling, but my resolve steady. Owen moved to stand beside me, a silent show of support. "Ms. Reeves," Detective Ferris said, addressing me directly, "I understand you've discovered evidence of potential financial fraud. I'd like to hear your account, and then we'll proceed from there." I glanced at Owen, who nodded encouragement. Then I began. I told them about the hotel receipt, the blazer, the family I discovered Ryan had lied about. I described the prenup, the rushed timeline, the way he'd insisted on keeping our finances separate while simultaneously gaining access to my accounts. Owen supplemented my story with printouts, bank statements showing transfers I hadn't authorized, phone records documenting hundreds of calls to Sienna Vaughn. Ryan sat motionless through it all, his expression blank. When I finished, Rebecca Kim opened her portfolio. "I represented the Caldwell family 3 years ago when they discovered Ryan had embezzled $470,000 from a company fund. The family chose not to press charges to avoid scandal, but they did sever all financial ties. Ryan was removed from all trusts, accounts, and corporate positions. A restraining order was filed preventing him from accessing family assets." She slid a document across the table. "This is that order, still active." Detective Ferris picked it up, scanning it. "And you believe he's repeated this behavior?" "I know he has," Rebecca said. "I've been monitoring civil filings. There are at least 2 other women who've sued Ryan for fraud in the past 3 years. Both cases were settled quietly, sealed records. But the pattern is clear." Ryan finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "You can't prove any of this." "Actually," Owen said, pulling out his own folder, "we can. I pulled your bank records, Ryan. Or should I say, the records for the joint account Natalie is primary on. In the past 2 months, you've transferred $34,000 in increments ranging from $500 to $8,500. All of it went to an offshore account registered under the name RVC Holdings." "RVC," Rebecca said. "Ryan Vaughn Caldwell. Your middle name?" Ryan's hands curled into fists. "That money was for investments. Shared investments." "Shared investments Natalie knew nothing about?" Owen's tone was withering. "Investments that happened to coincide with payments to Sienna Vaughn, who claims she was your interior designer despite never doing any work?" Sienna Vaughn is another victim," Detective Ferris interrupted. "She pulled out her own file, thicker than the others. We contacted her yesterday. She's agreed to cooperate fully. According to her testimony, you promised to marry her 2 years ago, convinced her to invest in a business venture, then disappeared with $60,000. She filed a lawsuit, which you settled by paying her back in installments. Installments funded by your current scam with Miss Reeves. The room fell silent. Ryan's breathing had quickened, his composure disintegrating. Furthermore, the detective continued, we've discovered that you used Ms. Reeves's social security number to open 3 credit lines without her knowledge. That's identity theft. Combined with the wire fraud, you're looking at federal charges. Ryan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I want a lawyer. You're going to need one, Detective Ferris said calmly. She nodded to someone outside the door, and 2 uniformed officers entered. Ryan Caldwell, you're under arrest for wire fraud and identity theft. The words seemed to come from very far away. I watched as the detective read him his rights as the officers moved forward with handcuffs. Ryan's eyes found mine, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw genuine emotion there. Not remorse, not apology, fear. Natalie, he said, his voice breaking. Please, you don't understand. But I did understand. Finally. Completely. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was sorry he'd been caught. The officers led him out, and the room exhaled collectively. My knees felt weak, and I sank into a chair, hands shaking. Owen crouched beside me, his hand on my shoulder. You okay? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Rebecca Kim was already on her phone, speaking in rapid legal jargon. Detective Ferris gathered her files, then paused before leaving. Ms. Reeves, I'll need you to come to the station to file a formal statement. But I want you to know, you did the right thing. A lot of victims don't come forward because they're embarrassed. But this man has a pattern, and you just stopped him from hurting anyone else. Thank you, I managed. After she left, Rebecca finished her call and turned to me. I'm filing an emergency motion to freeze the offshore account and reverse the transfers. We should have your money back within the week. I'm also filing a restraining order on your behalf and pursuing a defamation suit based on his accusations that you were mentally unstable. I didn't think about defamation, I admitted. You should. He tried to gaslight you, publicly accused you of paranoia, and attempted to ruin your credibility. That's actionable, and given his family's wealth, you're likely to win a substantial settlement. Owen squeezed my shoulder. It's over, Natalie. You're safe now. But even as he said it, I couldn't quite believe it. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and a hollow ache where trust used to be. I'd loved Ryan. I'd imagined a future with him. And every moment of that love had been built on lies. What would you have done differently? Could you have spotted the red flags earlier? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Over the next 6 weeks, the machinery of justice ground forward with methodical precision. Detective Ferris's investigation uncovered 3 credit cards Ryan had opened in my name, maxing them out to the tune of $18,000 before I'd caught him. The bank reversed those charges immediately, but the damage to my credit score would take months to repair. Owen's forensic audit revealed that the offshore account hadn't just received money from me. 2 other women had also transferred funds in the past year, both of them believing they were investing in business ventures Ryan promised to launch. Neither had realized they were being scammed until detectives contacted them. Sienna Vaughn, it turned out, was as much a victim as I was. Ryan had met her at a charity event 2 years ago, courted her with the same steady charm he'd used on me, and convinced her to invest in a luxury real estate project. When the project never materialized, she'd sued. Ryan had paid her back slowly, using money stolen from his next targets. By the time I came along, she'd cut ties with him completely, but her bank account showed transfers continuing for months afterward. Ryan had hacked her online banking, using old passwords she hadn't changed, and rerouted funds to make it look like she was still cooperating with him. When I learned that detail, I felt sick. How many people had Ryan hurt? How many lives had he torn apart with his carefully constructed lies? The legal process moved faster than I expected. Ryan's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but Detective Ferris and the prosecutor's office held firm. The evidence was overwhelming: bank records, phone logs, testimony from 4 different women, and the forensic audit that tracked every dollar Ryan had stolen. In the end, Ryan pleaded guilty to wire fraud, identity theft, and computer hacking. The judge sentenced him to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 5 years of probation. He was also ordered to pay restitution to all his victims, a sum totaling over $200,000. Rebecca Kim handled my civil case with ruthless efficiency. She filed motions to void the prenup, to recover all funds Ryan had taken, and to pursue damages for emotional distress and defamation. Ryan's family, through their attorney, offered a settlement to avoid a prolonged court battle. $120,000 paid immediately in exchange for my agreement not to discuss the case publicly. I took the deal, not because I wanted to protect Ryan, but because I wanted to move on. The money covered my legal fees, repaired my credit, and gave me a cushion to rebuild my life. More importantly, it gave me closure. The day I received the settlement check, I sat in my apartment, the same apartment I'd shared with Ryan, and tried to process everything that had happened. The furniture was the same, the walls were the same, but I felt like a different person. Someone harder, maybe, but also wiser. Someone who wouldn't ignore red flags or accept easy answers. Owen stopped by that evening with takeout and beer. We sat on the floor, eating pad thai straight from the containers, and he raised his bottle in a mock toast. "To survival," he said. "To survival," I echoed, clinking my bottle against his. "You know," Owen said after a moment, "I've worked fraud cases for 8 years. I've seen people lose everything: savings, homes, families. But I've also seen people come back stronger. You're going to be okay, Natalie. Better than okay." I wanted to believe him. Most days, I almost did. But there were still nights when I woke up wondering how I'd missed so much, how I'd fallen for someone who'd been playing me from the beginning. I keep thinking about the moments that should have been red flags, I admitted. The way he never wanted to talk about his past. The way he insisted on separate finances. The hotel receipt I found and just accepted his explanation for. I'm supposed to be good with numbers, good at spotting patterns. How did I miss this? Owen set down his container and looked at me seriously. Because he was a professional, Natalie. Ryan spent years perfecting this. He knew exactly what to say, how to act, when to push and when to pull back. You didn't miss anything. He was just that good at hiding. That doesn't make me feel better. It should, because it means you're not naive or stupid. You were targeted by someone who'd done this before. Someone who knew how to exploit trust. The fact that you figured it out and stopped him? That takes guts. Most people never get that far. I blinked back tears, nodding. Owen was right. Intellectually, I knew that. But emotionally, the betrayal still stung. A week later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Ms. Reeves." The voice was cultured, measured, distinctly upper class. "This is Vivian Caldwell." I straightened, suddenly alert. "Mrs. Caldwell, I wanted to call personally to apologize for my son's actions and for the pain he's caused you. Rebecca has kept me informed of the case, and I want you to know that Graham and I support the prosecution fully." "Thank you," I said carefully, unsure where this was going. "I also wanted to offer something, if you're amenable. I understand you work as a financial analyst. We have an opening at Caldwell Enterprises for a senior analyst position. The role involves overseeing our investment portfolio, reporting directly to our CFO. If you're interested, I'd be happy to arrange an interview." I blinked, momentarily speechless. "Mrs. Caldwell, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not offering this out of guilt," she interrupted, her tone firm. "I'm offering because Rebecca tells me you're exceptionally talented at financial analysis. She showed me some of your work, the way you unraveled Ryan's scheme with minimal resources. That's the kind of analytical mind we need. I'll need to think about it, I said honestly. Of course. Take your time. But Natalie, please understand something. My son made his own choices. His crimes are his alone. You stopped him from hurting more people. That matters. And I believe good people deserve good opportunities. She ended the call before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone in bewilderment. The idea of working for Ryan's family felt surreal, almost inappropriate. But the more I thought about it, the more it made a strange kind of sense. It would be a fresh start, a chance to prove myself in a role that challenged me. And it would mean Ryan's attempt to destroy my career had backfired completely. I called Owen to discuss it, and he laughed. Are you kidding? Take the job. The salary is probably amazing, and honestly, there's a beautiful irony to it. Ryan tried to use you to rebuild his life. Instead, you're getting the opportunity he threw away. He had a point. I scheduled the interview. 3 weeks later, I sat across from Graham Caldwell and his CFO in the Caldwell Enterprises boardroom. The interview was rigorous, technical, demanding. They asked about portfolio management, risk assessment, regulatory compliance. I answered every question with precision, drawing on years of experience and the crash course in forensic analysis I'd gotten from Owen. At the end, Graham leaned back in his chair, studying me. You understand that working here means dealing with questions about your connection to Ryan. People will talk. Let them, I said calmly. I have nothing to hide, and if anyone asks, I'll tell them the truth. Your son tried to defraud me, and I stopped him. End of story. Graham smiled faintly. You're hired. Start date is 2 weeks from Monday. I walked out of that building feeling lighter than I had in months. The job was real. The salary was more than I'd made at my previous firm. And for the first time since discovering Ryan's lies, I felt like I was moving forward instead of just surviving. The week before I started my new job, I had one final task to complete. The engagement ring Ryan had given me sat in a small box in my dresser, where I'd shoved it the day he was arrested. I'd avoided looking at it, as though acknowledging its existence would somehow drag me back into the nightmare. But I couldn't leave it there forever. I called the insurance company that had appraised it during our engagement. They confirmed they could process a return and refund the coverage premium. I packaged the ring carefully, writing a brief note. Policy number attached. Ring returned. Coverage no longer needed. I dropped it at the post office, watching the clerk scan the label and toss it into a bin. As I walked back to my car, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't scared. I wasn't even sad. I was simply done. Ryan Caldwell had taken months of my life, thousands of dollars, and a piece of my ability to trust. But he hadn't broken me. He'd made me stronger, sharper, more aware. I would never again ignore red flags or accept easy explanations. I would never again let someone convince me that love meant surrendering my autonomy. That evening, I went to my mother's house for dinner. She'd known about Ryan's arrest, had offered to come stay with me in the aftermath, but I'd insisted I was fine. Now, sitting in her kitchen while she made my favorite meal, I finally let my guard down. How are you really doing? She asked, sliding a plate of lasagna in front of me. I'm okay, I said. Actually, I'm better than okay. I got a new job, senior analyst position at Caldwell Enterprises. Her eyes widened. Ryan's family? Yeah, turns out they're decent people. It's just their son who's the problem. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Not just for surviving this, but for fighting back. A lot of people would have just walked away and tried to forget. I thought about it, I admitted. But I kept thinking about the other women Ryan hurt. If I'd walked away, he would have found someone else. Someone who might not have had Owen to help them, or the resources to fight back. I couldn't let that happen. That's my girl, she said softly. We ate in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes with family. After dinner, we sat on the porch watching the sunset, and my mother told me about her week, about the book club she'd joined and the neighbor's cat that kept sneaking into her garden. Normal, mundane things. It felt like coming home after a long journey. As I drove back to my apartment that night, I thought about the past few months, about how close I'd come to losing everything, about how one hotel receipt had unraveled an entire web of lies. I thought about Ryan sitting in a federal prison cell, facing the consequences of his choices. And I thought about myself, about the woman I'd become through this ordeal. Stronger, yes, but also more compassionate. I understood now how easy it was to fall for a skilled liar, how trust could be weaponized against good people. I pulled into my parking spot and turned off the engine. The building looked the same as always, its brick facade worn but sturdy. I knew I'd eventually move, find a place without memories of Ryan. But for now, this was still home. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment, my phone buzzed, a text from Owen. "Drinks this weekend to celebrate the new job?" I smiled, typing back, "Absolutely. You're buying." "Deal. Proud of you, Nat." I unlocked my door and stepped inside. The apartment was quiet, empty. But it didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. I made myself a cup of tea and stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. Cleveland stretched before me, familiar and constant. Somewhere out there, other people were fighting their own battles, facing their own betrayals. I hoped they had someone like Owen in their corner. I hoped they found the courage to fight back. The engagement ring was gone. The lies were exposed. The man who'd tried to destroy me was facing justice, and I was still standing. I raised my mug in a silent toast to myself, to survival, to the future I was going to build on my own terms. The steam from the tea fogged the window briefly, then cleared. Outside, the city glittered. Inside, I was home. 2 months into my new job at Caldwell Enterprises, I received an email from Detective Ferris. Ryan had been transferred to a federal facility in Pennsylvania. He was appealing his sentence, but the prosecutor was confident the conviction would stand. More importantly, 2 additional women had come forward after seeing news coverage of the case. Both had been scammed by Ryan years ago, before he targeted me. Both were now pursuing civil suits. I forwarded the email to Owen with a single line. "He's finally facing everything he's done." Owen replied within minutes. "And you're the reason why. Never forget that." I saved his message, a reminder for the days when doubt crept in. At work, I threw myself into my new role with focused intensity. The portfolio I managed was complex, involving investments across multiple sectors, requiring constant analysis and adjustment. It was exactly the kind of challenge I needed. My colleagues were professional, respectful, and if they knew about my history with Ryan, they never mentioned it. Vivian Caldwell stopped by my office once, about 6 weeks after I started. She knocked lightly on the open door, waiting for my invitation to enter. "Mrs. Caldwell," I said, standing, "please sit. I won't take much of your time. I just wanted to see how you're settling in." "The work is challenging, but I'm enjoying it." She nodded, then hesitated, her polished composure slipping slightly. I also wanted to say something I should have said during that phone call. I failed as a mother. I knew Ryan had issues, knew he was capable of deceit. But I thought cutting him off financially would be enough. I thought it would force him to change. Instead, it just made him more dangerous. "Mrs. Caldwell, you're not responsible for his choices." "Perhaps not, but I am responsible for not warning people, for keeping his crimes quiet to protect the family name. If I'd been braver, if I'd pressed charges 3 years ago, you and those other women wouldn't have suffered." I considered her words carefully. "You're right that more transparency might have helped. But Ryan was an adult. He made conscious decisions to hurt people. That's on him, not you." She smiled sadly. "You're generous. More generous than I deserve. But thank you for saying it." She straightened, her composure returning. "If you ever need anything, my door is always open." After she left, I sat quietly for a moment, processing the conversation. Vivian Caldwell carried her own guilt, her own what ifs. We all did. Everyone touched by Ryan's web of lies. But guilt wasn't the same as responsibility. I couldn't control what Ryan had done. I could only control how I moved forward. And I was moving forward. 6 months after Ryan's arrest, I met someone new. Not romantically, at least not at first. His name was David, and he worked in the risk management department. We'd cross paths in meetings, exchanged polite professional small talk. Then one day, he invited me to join a group going to a Cavaliers game. I said yes, surprising myself. At the game, surrounded by colleagues laughing and cheering, I realized I was having fun. Genuine, uncomplicated fun. David was funny without trying too hard, smart without being condescending. When he offered to walk me to my car afterward, I agreed. "This might be too forward," he said as we reached my car. "But would you want to grab coffee sometime? Just the two of us?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. But another part, the part Ryan had damaged, held back. "I need to be honest with you," I said. "I got out of a really difficult relationship not that long ago. I'm not sure I'm ready to date yet." David nodded, his expression understanding. "Fair enough. But for what it's worth, I'm not in a rush. If you ever want to grab that coffee as friends, the offer stands." "Thank you," I said sincerely. He smiled and walked away. Hands in his pockets. No pressure, no manipulation, just a genuine offer. I drove home thinking about the difference between David's approach and Ryan's. Ryan had moved fast, creating intimacy before trust was earned. David was willing to wait, to let things develop naturally. Maybe, I thought, that was what healthy looked like. 3 weeks later, I texted David and asked about that coffee. We met at a cafe near the office, talking for 2 hours about everything except work. He told me about his family, his hobbies, his failed attempt to learn guitar. I told him about my mother, my love of hiking, my recent obsession with true crime podcasts. When he walked me back to my car, he didn't try to kiss me. He just said, "I had a really great time. Let's do this again." "I'd like that," I replied. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something real. Something built on honesty instead of deception. 1 year after Ryan's arrest, I attended his parole hearing. I didn't have to go, but Detective Ferris had called to let me know it was happening, and something in me needed to see it through. The hearing was brief, clinical. Ryan sat in prison orange, thinner than I remembered, his confidence stripped away by months of incarceration. When it was my turn to speak, I kept my statement short. Ryan Caldwell targeted me because he thought I was vulnerable. He lied about his past, manipulated my trust, and attempted to steal my financial future. But he underestimated me. I fought back, and he's facing consequences because of that. I don't forgive him. I don't wish him well. But I've moved on. And I hope he uses his time in prison to understand the damage he's caused. The parole board denied his early release. He would serve his full 18 months. As I left the courthouse, I felt lighter. This chapter was truly closed now. Ryan was in prison. I had a career I loved, friends who supported me, and the tentative beginning of a relationship with someone who respected my boundaries. I walked to my car, the afternoon sun warm on my face. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "How did it go?" "It went well," I typed back. "I'm free." And I was. The drive back to my apartment took me through downtown Cleveland, past the building where I'd worked when I first met Ryan. I found myself taking a slight detour, pulling into a parking spot near the coffee shop where we'd had our first real conversation. It looked exactly the same. Same faded awning, same crooked sign in the window, advertising seasonal drinks. I sat in my car for a moment, staring at it. A year ago, walking past this place would have gutted me. Now, I felt nothing but mild curiosity. The memories were there, but they'd lost their power. They were just things that had happened, not wounds that still bled. My phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," I answered. "You're calling during work hours." Everything okay? Everything's fine. I just wanted to check in. I know today was the hearing. His voice was careful, respectful of boundaries we'd established early on. He never pushed, never demanded details I wasn't ready to share. It's done. He's serving his full sentence. Good. A pause. How are you feeling? I considered the question honestly. Relieved. Ready to fully move forward. Want company tonight? I could bring dinner. Or not, if you'd rather be alone. No pressure either way. That was David, always offering options, never assumptions. Dinner sounds perfect. 7? 7 works. See you then? After we hung up, I sat for another moment, watching people walk in and out of the coffee shop. Young couples, business professionals, students with laptops, all of them living their lives, carrying their own stories, their own scars and triumphs. I was just one person among millions, and somehow that thought was comforting rather than diminishing. I pulled back onto the road, but instead of heading straight home, I found myself driving toward Lake Erie. The water had always calmed me, even before Ryan, even before all of this. When I reached the shore, I parked and walked down to the edge, where small waves lapped against the rocks. The wind off the water was cold, carrying the smell of approaching autumn. I pulled my jacket tighter and thought about the woman I'd been 14 months ago. She'd wanted safety so badly that she'd mistaken control for stability. She'd been so afraid of ending up like her mother, struggling alone, that she'd overlooked every warning sign screaming at her to run. But that woman had also been brave enough to investigate when something felt wrong, smart enough to ask for help, strong enough to face the truth, even when it shattered everything she'd believed. I owed her something. Not pity, not regret, but acknowledgement. She'd saved us both. A young woman jogging past smiled at me, earbuds in, ponytail swinging. I smiled back. A stranger connected to another stranger through nothing more than shared humanity. There was something beautiful in that simplicity. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Owen. Heard the hearing went your way. Drinks this weekend to celebrate? Absolutely, I typed back. First round's on you. Always is. Proud of you, Nat. I pocketed my phone and took one last look at the water. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful and temporary, like most things worth seeing. When I finally drove home, the late afternoon traffic was light. I thought about what waited for me tonight. David bringing dinner, probably Thai food, because he'd learned it was my favorite. My mother calling later to check in, the way she always did after something significant. Maybe a movie. Something light and forgettable, just to unwind. Normal things, healthy things. The kind of evening I'd once taken for granted before Ryan taught me how precious ordinary peace could be. The engagement ring was gone. The lies were exposed. The man who tried to destroy me was behind bars. And I was building a life filled with truth, stability, and the quiet strength that came from surviving the worst and choosing to thrive anyway. I unlocked my car, slid into the driver's seat, and looked at myself in the rearview mirror. The woman staring back was different from the one who'd found a hotel receipt in a coat pocket. She was harder, yes, but also more complete. Someone who knew her worth and wouldn't settle for less. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, heading toward a future I was finally ready to embrace. No shadows following, no doubt remaining. Just the open road ahead, and the unshakable knowledge that I had survived.